Let's get right to our panel. Joining us now, MSNBC contributor Joy Reid and MSNBC contributor Susan Del Percio. And also joining us is Democratic pollster Celinda Lake. Thanks,
Hi.
ladies. All right, it's the ladies talking now. So, Celinda, it's been about a week since we first learned that Paul Ryan was going to be the running mate, and he came jogging off the deck of that battleship. But it's noticeable that the polls haven't really budged, which is interesting because ever since 1996, Republicans have actually gotten about a 5-point bounce after they've announced their vice presidential pick. So why are they not seeing that with Paul Ryan?
You know, you're absolutely right. And the other thing is, usually right after they're picked, the vice presidential candidate's pretty popular, and Paul Ryan's not. I think because right out of the box, the Democrats did a great job of raising questions about Medicare. And this is a major, major vulnerability of this team. And then they started to look at the tax consequences of the Ryan budget. And, you know, this is a great gift to Democrats because we kept saying the Ryan budget, the Ryan budget. Everybody said, who's Ryan? Now they know. And the Ryan budget would actually give Mitt Romney a tax break, which we're pretty sure he doesn't need, even though we can't see his taxes. So this guy's getting defined negatively. He's hurting the ticket in places like Florida and Iowa. And this is a great boost to the Democrats, who are even more enthusiastic than the Republicans about this nominee.
You know, Susan, talking about Medicare, we saw it was reported today that Romney and Ryan are going to team back up next week and try to put some of this Medicare talk to rest. But it also struck me that, remember when they made the announcement, similar to when Sarah Palin was announced 4 years ago, it was, we're going to split up, we're going to, double the amount of ground we can cover. And now, just 1 week into it, just like we saw with Sarah Palin, they got to bring them back together. And it really felt like they just were not prepared for the obvious questions about comparisons between Romney's plans and Ryan's plans.
Well, there are certain issues with the rollout. The day one was fantastic. It was a secret. They did a good job out of it. Everyone was surprised what happened 2, 3, 4. They should have been more in sync. But just to go back to that question about why didn't they get a bump, we've never had an electorate with 3 to 5% being the independent swing. I mean, this is more decisive. So there's really not a lot of room for anyone to get much of a bump, whether it's announcing your VP or either of the conventions. I don't expect those numbers to change that much because they're so divided. But when you do talk about bringing them together as far as campaigning, it's a smart choice. If Mitt Romney looks more comfortable and he's doing better with that energy beside him, then let them go together. Why wouldn't you play to your positive?
But I think that goes to this issue of actually enthusiasm, and enthusiasm with the base. I mean, if he needs Paul Ryan to be with him to kind of keep that enthusiasm, and are we going to see that kind of enthusiasm in the polls? I mean, you may be right about the 3 to 5%, but has the enthusiasm changed? I mean, that's a real test for this ticket.
Right, and that's basically why they chose Paul Ryan. If they're looking that they need to get their base out, you're going to each side is probably looking at this. We need to get the most base that we can. That's how we're going to win it. The independents are too small that we have to rely on our base. A lot of people have been saying that Obama doesn't have the enthusiasm of a lot of the constituencies.
Well, the recent polls actually show he does.
But especially when you look at the youth vote, which is really an important number to look at when it comes to turnout. So if the Republicans can really get their base out, that independent vote of 3 to 5% won't matter as much as I think what they're betting on today.
Yeah. So, Joanne, I want to switch to talking about Florida a little bit, because we know, Medicare is one of the big issues we've talked about in the context of Florida. But also, you made a really great point earlier this week about the impact that some of the voter ID laws may be having on the Latino population, which is kind of the other major factor in the state of Florida, and that those ID laws actually have sort of disproportionately, and the purging of those lists, gone after people with a Latino-sounding last name. Is that going to help even things out for the Romney-Ryan ticket?
Well, I'm sure that they probably hope it will. I mean, Florida has had voter ID a little longer than a lot of these other swing states, so it's actually been in place. And I don't think that that's going to be much of a factor in that state. The things that were going to matter, right, we're shorting the early vote period, which both African-American and Hispanic voters use quite heavily in Florida. But the purge list really was targeted at the Latino population. What the Florida governor and what the Republican-based legislator wanted to do, they wanted to use this immigration list from ICE to be able to compare just last names, if they matched at all, to be able to challenge those voters. This is about the declining share of the Hispanic population in Florida that's Cuban-American. Cuban-Americans are the one Hispanic group that is majority Republican. But Florida is becoming a less and less Cuban-American state. You're seeing a lot of Puerto Ricans. You're seeing a lot of other ethnic groups within the Hispanic cohort moving in there, particularly in Central Florida. So it's becoming harder and harder for Republicans to win the Hispanic vote. Even Marco Rubio only got half of it. Right. So that's, I think, really the reason that they're going so strongly at trying to delete voters from the rolls. And I think you're seeing this all over the country. It's a game of deletion. Even by picking Paul Ryan, it's clear Republicans don't think they can add to their constituency, so they're trying to subtract from the other side.
Well, to your point, if Rubio himself only got about half of the population, then he's not the guy who's going to help deliver that vote, clearly.
No, he wouldn't.
So, Linda, I want to pick up on this because, nationally, obviously, the changing demographics with the Latino population are a big factor in this election, and it was a big week in immigration. You had the Dreamers were first able to essentially apply for citizenship. But one of the things in polling that we're seeing, the Latino vote could really make the difference in a lot of those western states and even some of those Midwestern states, and even in places like Virginia and North Carolina in ways people don't expect. But the polls I've seen suggest that Ryan is not necessarily going to help with those populations either because of Medicare.
Yes, because of Medicare, because of his cuts in children's programs, which is a top priority with the Latino population, and because of his opposition to the DREAM Act. So Ryan is a big detriment, and putting Ryan on the ticket instead of, say, a Rubio was basically saying you don't care about the Latino vote, and that is a big mistake for the Republicans, and George Bush and Karl Rove identified that a decade ago.
Susan, I can't let you go without talking about some of the fun crazies in your party.
You have your fun crazies too.
No, we do, but I like for everybody to get their crazies on the table. So we had some interesting comments this week. We had Joe the plumber talking about standing essentially on the border and start shooting would be his way to. Is that really going to welcome Latinos to the party?
That would be in the crazy kind of column. Yes, that goes in the crazy column. Probably not the way to go. But and that's what grabs headlines. But that's obviously not the policy for the Republican Party. That's his point of view that happens to get a lot of attention, especially in Arizona.
But all right, guys, thanks so much for joining me. Thanks to Joy-Ann Reid, Susan Del Percio, and Celinda Lake. Stay with us. Much more ahead.
We have been very transparent to what's legally required of us. But the more we release, the more we get attacked. The more we get questioned, the more we get pushed. And so we have done what's legally required, and there's going to be no more tax releases given.